Welcome to another segment of POPA On Point. My name is Brian Moriguchi, and I'm the president of the Professional Peace Officers Association, commonly referred to as POPA. I'm joined today by Sheriff Jim McDonnell to talk about his re-election bid for sheriff. Welcome, Jim.
Thanks, Brian.
Let me start with a few questions about your past performance. What do you think are your biggest accomplishments in the last 3 years?
You know, when I look back on where we were 4 years ago and look at where we are today, we have come such a long way as an organization. And when I think of how we got there, it's a tribute to the men and women of this organization who do incredible things with very little in the way of personnel resources to be able to accomplish that as compared with other police agencies across America. When I look at the credibility of the organization, I have the opportunity to go across the country and deal with sheriffs from other major organizations in the Major County Sheriff's Association, Major City Chiefs Association, International Association of Chiefs of Police, and the feedback I get is really very humbling. You know, the perception of our organization nationwide and worldwide is something that unfortunately most of our folks don't get an opportunity to be able to see how others see us. The credibility of the organization has been restored. When we took office, one of my big things was to be able to restore public trust in our organization, which is the currency of policing. And I believe that we have done that as a team. We have moved together in the last 4 years in a way where the public looks to us, in a way they trust us, they reach out to us, and they believe in us. And that's really what it's all about in being a public safety agency. And when I look at other issues that are our core mission, crime reduction, in the last 4 years we have dealt with, you know, AB 109 fallout, Prop 47, Prop 57, recently the legalization of marijuana. All of these things have unintended impacts on public safety and the delivery of public safety. And I look at our ability to be able to stay the course, to be able to continue to work on crime issues, particularly violent crime issues, and to be able then to get success. When I look at 2017, we were down in every crime category except burglary, which was essentially flat. 2018, we're trending in the same direction. We're down 7% in violent crime and over 9% in property crime. And so what a tribute that is to the men and women doing this job every day. Arrests are up. Our people are out there, they're engaged, they're ambassadors for us in the community, and there is a feeling, I believe, in the community that we're privileged to serve, that we are the community's sheriff's department. That's how they see us. When I look at the custody environment, which was so troubled, we're all well aware of the issues there, and to have consent decrees and settlement agreements and monitors overseeing the work that's being done every day, the behavior, the performance, that's a group that is fairly critical of every action that we take. And what we do is critically important in the lives of so many. But the comments in the most recent briefing that we got from the monitor team on the ROSA settlement agreement was we have seen a sea change in the last 4 years. And for them to say that in their perception of the way that our staff interacts with inmates and also on use of force issues, a sea change is a very strong statement from a monitor team, and one that I am exceptionally proud of, and proud of the men and women who work in a very difficult, complex, and sometimes dangerous environment and do it exceptionally well with compassion. I don't know that there's another place in America, or maybe the world, where you have the conditions that we have here, where you have the scale of the issues that we deal with. In the custody environment, the increasing number of people who are dealing with serious mental illness, and the trajectory on that group of people is going up rapidly. And then as a result of AB 109, the changing population that went from a county jail population, a traditional population, to a quasi-state prison population, as well then as the mental health, 30%, 31% of our inmate population are dealing with serious mental health issues. So it is a very difficult environment, but the results we're getting are exceptionally good. We just got approval to be able to move forward on the $2.2 billion consolidated correctional treatment facility to replace Men's Central Jail. Granted, that's 10 years off before it's finally going to be completed, but we're on track. We're moving in the right direction. that will give our inmate population that are so needy for programming space, for out-of-cell time, for a more therapeutic environment to be able to get that. And hopefully we'll be able to have some impact on our ability to be able to provide diversionary services to people in the community so that they're not repeating that cycle of dysfunction, coming into jail, being released, reoffending, coming back. Very, very expensive and not a humane way of dealing with a very serious problem in our society.
I'll ask you a few questions about the jail a little later on in our interview. What about failures? Are there anything, and failures is kind of a strong word, so I don't know if I'd use that, but is there anything that you would have done differently if you could go back to the first day when you became sheriff?
You know, I've thought about that, and I have no regrets. Over the last 4 years, there are things that in retrospect you might say, you know what, we could have done that differently, we could have communicated better with our audience, and I think that's a big thing that lessons learned for the future. But when I look at the experiences that we've gone through together as an organization during some very difficult periods, we were able to navigate in a way where I think we came out with a good outcome, one that we could be proud of. There are always lessons learned, as we all know, when we do a tactical debrief. We find ways that maybe we could have done this better or that, but you operate with the information you have available at the time. My style is not to try and do it all on my own, but to meet with my senior leadership team, to meet with subject matter experts throughout the department, to be able to get their perspective when we have time to do that on which direction we're going to take and what are the expected outcomes and what will likely be the unintended consequences, and try and account for them in advance. Communication is so critical, though, and I always look for opportunities to be able to learn from what we've done and try and figure out if this were to come across again, how would we do it differently? And generally, it's a communication issue.
You came from a pretty strong background with the LAPD as a deputy chief,
first assistant chief,
and then of course chief of Long Beach, and now sheriff. When you became sheriff, was there anything that popped out like, oh my gosh, this is crazy? I mean, we're a huge department, the biggest department.
You know, people often ask me, you know, you've been a chief of police and now you're the sheriff. What's the difference between the two jobs? And after thinking about that, what I generally tell them is that being a chief of police is different as to scale, depending on the size of the city that you're working in. But the job is essentially the same, or similar at least. The job of sheriff is different depending on where you are in the country, and markedly different. And there are places back east where the sheriff's responsible for a relatively small jail and transportation of the inmates to court, and that's it. And I look at the LA County Sheriff's Department here, and we are a comprehensive policing agency. Comparing ourselves with the LAPD, our partners next door, we have about the same number of sworn employees. LAPD polices 470 square miles. We police 4,700 square miles, 10 times that, with the same number of people, which would be somewhat of an apples-to-apples comparison if that's what we did. We police 4 million people directly, as does LAPD. Indirectly, we police over 10 million people. But then in addition, we stretch out those personnel assets across the jails, the courts, the colleges, the hospitals, the parks, search and rescue, and a third of MTA, as well as other things that we do. Each of those, or most of those, specialties are the largest of their kind in the nation. Most of them would be standalone, specialized police departments anywhere else in the country. The taxpayers of Los Angeles County, I believe, get a tremendous value for their tax-paying dollar with the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. We are stretched thin, but we have great people who accept the mission and move forward.
So with those numbers and a clear difference between officers on the street per capita versus other departments,
right.
Do you believe that we should have more officers in this department? Should the Board of Supervisors be funding more officers?
Oh, absolutely.
More deputy sheriffs?
Absolutely. When I look at New York, Chicago, Philadelphia, Boston, they have generally between 4 and 4.5 officers per 1,000 population. The West Coast is leaner. LAPD, for instance, has 2.5 officers per 1,000 population. When I look at us, if we were to remove the numbers of folks that work in the jails and in the courts, because those are fixed post positions, many others are as well, but just taking those two out, and you look at our deputy to population ratio, it's about 0.65. So what that's saying is that some of these big back east departments have 6 to 7 times as many deputies to population as we do here. So it's amazing we're able to get done what we do get done, but it's certainly a tribute to the men and women of this organization who do the job as well as it can be done.
I agree.
Yeah.
Let me ask you some questions about morale, because our members, and we may have a different opinion on morale, but we did poll our members and asked them what they thought about morale in the department. The numbers were pretty staggering to us, and when we did that survey, that was after a year into your tenure as sheriff. And our concern is it may be getting worse today. We don't know because we haven't polled our members, but we do hear from our members and they do complain a lot. But before I go into a whole bunch of morale questions, let me ask you one in particular, which is the recruitment effort. Because we really do believe that the shortage of personnel is the root of many of our problems. You know, with the overtime, excessive overtime, just quality of life for our members. Now, we have been told that last year, well, let me go back. We recommended a task force be created, which you agreed to, and that was created back in August. We have a lot of frustration with that task force, partly because it's being run by essentially the folks who have, in our eyes, not accomplished the mission in hiring, but they're running the task force. And we felt that the task force should be more of a joint thing between labor and management to try and resolve the issues.
Right.
We also have had very few meetings, and to date, I don't even know what the goal of the task force is or any recommendations that have been made. But I know internally there have been some changes made in the manner of recruiting and training and all that. But what bothers us is what we're hearing is that last year when they were firing on all cylinders, the department was firing on all cylinders, they ended up with 100 less deputies than when they started. And we're hearing this year that they're already 100 less than what they've hired this year. Do you think the Sheriff's Department has a good plan on recruitment and hiring, or do some things need to change?
Oh, I think it's a work in progress. I think we've come a long way from where we were. I think we have a long way to go. You mentioned the task force. I think that probably we can get more out of that task force than we've seen so far. It should be a joint operation between labor and management, not for us to abdicate the responsibility of recruiting and hiring. That is our job and our role, and we take that very seriously. But a lot has come out without a lot of fanfare. A lot of input has come out of that task force, and we've acted on that as we go. For instance, we went from 8 people working recruiting to now 23 people are working recruiting. We reached out, we picked the best and the brightest that we could find throughout the organization to do that, and we've then now equipped them with tools to be able to travel, to be able to seek out places where we hope to get good return on our time in the recruiting side. For the last 5 classes in the academy, we've had 85 recruits. This coming class in September, we plan on having 90 recruits. Currently in the academy, we have 325 people in 4 classes. So we are trending in the right direction. It is very hard, as you know, nationwide, to be able to recruit quality people to be candidates for any law enforcement organization. So when we talk about frustration with on morale issues as it relates to recruiting, that certainly is not a problem here alone. It is a problem that I hear from chiefs of police and sheriffs from across the nation. It is very difficult in light of a lot of the media coverage we've seen over the last 10 years of police community relations, where an incident will be magnified through the media. Police will be portrayed in a negative light, and that has an impact on all of us and our ability to be able to build for the next generation. And so as we move forward, each and every person watching this, each and every person who is not only a current member of the LA County Sheriff's Department, but a retired member or somebody who's a family member, we all have an opportunity to be able to help build the next generation of LASD by reaching out to people who we believe would be good candidates and encouraging them to apply. We're still in a position where for every 100 people who apply, 4 will make it to the academy, 3 will make it through the academy. I don't know of another profession that has a 97% washout rate. That says an awful lot about our selection process, but it also says a lot about this is a very difficult job, and it's the best job in the world for those who are cut out for it, but not everybody's cut out for it. And so this is a continuous work in progress. We take it very seriously. We greatly value the union input on the recruitment task force. And really, it's all about you mentioned didn't know what the mission of it was. The mission is to be able to pick everybody's brain. Everybody brings a different perspective, and to be able to come up with strategies that maybe we've overlooked before, that maybe weren't resourced before, and to be able to put them to bear on the issue we're dealing with, to be able to cast the net maybe wider and in a different place, to be able to get a better outcome than 4 out of 100, to get more qualified people applying so we have a greater success rate there. But in looking at our capacity currently in the academy and the number of classes we're putting through, we're doing pretty well right now, and that's something that, as you know, is a constant work in progress to be able to get enough people coming in the door with the interest in the testing to be able to get us where we need to get to. And that's why recruiting really is everyone's job, but it's also directly affected by how we're perceived in the public eye. Our image, our reputation, our credibility, all of these things factor into our success in being able to recruit the best that are out there to become members of this department. So everything we do affects our ability to be able to shape the next generation.
I know that we have 10,000 roughly employees that would be great recruiters, but what we're finding is a lot of them are unhappy either in their jobs, frustrated with their jobs, to where they don't recommend this department. They may recommend other departments, but they don't recommend this department.
Right.
And that's disturbing to me that we have people who have worked for 20, 30 years in this organization who don't think it's a good enough organization for their kid or their nephew or their niece. That is a concern that I don't think we've addressed. I don't think the department has really addressed looking at why. Why are they unhappy? It's not just overtime. I think there's a whole cadre of issues that they may have. It could be discipline. It could be how they're treated overall.
When we talk about morale, I think it's important that we put in context that we are probably living through the most difficult period in American policing's history. This has been a tough 10 years, I would say, just as to put it in a context. A lot of our people who are our best recruiters are telling their friends, their relatives, their sons and daughters, it's not a good time to come on this job. And whether this job is the LASD or whether it's policing in general, we're hearing the same things from people across the country, that they're not encouraging their friends or their kids to come and work in policing. And that's sad, because this is a great profession, the most noble of all professions, going through some difficult times. And it's critical that we have the best people trained up for the future, so that as we move on and all retire, that we're able to look back proudly that we set the table for the next generation to be able to come and be even better than we were. That's something that we're taking very seriously, we're working very hard at, but it's something that is a leadership challenge across the nation. When we talk about morale, again, that is such a hard thing to be able to come up with any kind of analytics on. What does morale mean? It means different things to different people, but it is shaped by leadership. Leadership not just at my level or senior executive level of the department, but for everybody in the department. Every one of us is a leader, and every one of us has to realize that we are looked upon as a role model for others, whether we want to be or not. So we have to be positive. We have to be leaders in that we're going to find a way to be able to solve the problems of public safety. We're going to find a way to overcome obstacles that get in our way. That's why we only take 4 out of 100, because we want leaders. We're putting people in a position where people will only call them on the worst day of their life, when their world is upside down, expecting them to roll out and make it better. So we have a cadre of people, granted a lot of type A personalities, and everybody wants to do as much as they can, and that's a challenge. But we have great people, and we have people that sometimes get frustrated like we all do, and we have to do our best to be able to challenge them, challenge each one of us to be able to focus our energies on doing the best we can for our organization, the public that we serve, and the people that we have the opportunity to be able to work with, to supervise, to mentor, and to be able to set them up for success.
Let me go back to the recruiting process. A lot of our members in the discussion at the task force, they were frustrated with the length of time or the difficulties in getting through a background process, and a lot of their kids ended up going to LAPD of all places,
Right.
but to LAPD. We're hearing that the process has increased now up to 18 months to process, where LAPD is significantly less, probably less than 6 months to process. But we're also hearing, when you talk about the problems in recruitment, the environment, and everything, that's true, but then why is it we're being told that LAPD is fully staffed and they're even going beyond? They're actually in preparation for the Olympics already, and they're hiring beyond what their numbers are, but they are at full staff right now. Why is it that LAPD is able to get to full staffing while we're still so shorthanded?
Well, full staffing, I think, is how do you define that? Because if they're staffed to what they're budgeted to, that might be considered full staff, but they're roughly in the same general ballpark as we are as far as the number of officers they have. They have about 9,600 officers in the department and about 3,000 civilian professional staff. We have about 9,500 deputies and 9,000 professional staff. And so two big organizations next to each other, both competing for the same candidates in large part. A lot of that will be affected by what the job is, how the job is perceived at LAPD versus LASD. And we still have a perception out there that when you come into our organization, you're going to go to the academy and then you're going to be in the jail for years, many years. That's not the case anymore. People come out of the academy and want to get to the street. It depends on which station they want to get to, but we see people coming out in a little more than a year in some cases and being able to get a different assignment. Some choose to stay in custody longer. Some will stay in custody longer if the station they're trying to get to is harder to get in. And so there are a number of variables there, but we need to do a better job of being able to educate the public and our potential candidate pool as to what the organization offers. When I look at comparing LASD with any other police agency, and I look at the opportunities in this organization to be able to work so many different assignments over the length of a career, and other agencies don't have those assignments. I went through a list of, the jails, the courts, the colleges, the hospitals, the parks, search and rescue, MTA, and all of the specialties then that other police agencies have, detectives, counterterrorism, human trafficking, robbery, homicide, narcotics, you name it, we have it. And we have, I would argue, some of the best people in the nation working in each one of those specialties. So to be able to come into an organization with a career path ahead of you that you're in large part going to decide what you're going to be able to do, but you have an opportunity to be able to do so much that, unfortunately for others in other organizations, they're limited by the size and scope of what their organization is responsible for. So we need to do a better job of selling that, to marketing ourselves in that way. But again, as I mentioned, recruiting touches everything we do. Every time somebody reads the paper or sees us on TV or hears about us through a friend, or anytime we stop somebody in the field and they talk about how they were treated, each of these is a component of the recruitment process, because the word will get out there and we need to be viewed in a positive light by everybody. Within reason, when you look at the responsibilities we have, people don't call us when things are going well. They call us when they need help. But each one of us has a responsibility to be fair, to be professional, and to do the job the way the public would expect it to be done. And if we do that, that's all a component, too, of the recruiting process. People want to be part of a winning team.
Do you think LAPD is doing a better job than sheriff's deputies out there?
I spent a long time, 29 years with LAPD, and they would always look at LASD and say the same thing. LASD is getting people through quicker. They're taking our candidates away. I heard the same thing in Long Beach. And so I think it depends, where you stand depends on where you sit. And, there's things that are done maybe quicker or more efficiently in another organization, maybe, and we can learn from that. But people are also learning from us every day. And when I look at where we were 5 years ago, where it took 36 months in some cases for people to process, we got it down at one point to 8 months, and now you mentioned it's back up to 18. I don't know that to be the case, but we'll check into that. But certainly, that's a critical issue. When someone's looking for a job, whoever calls first may get the opportunity for the candidate. And if they're a very solid candidate, certainly they're being sought after by a number of different agencies. So We don't want to jeopardize doing a solid background and a good selection process to be able to get the right people, but we don't want to delay things unnecessarily to where we lose people to other departments. We have automated much of our recruitment process as far as the ability to keep in touch with people during the process as it goes on, and to keep them informed and to communicate effectively with them using a software program that was developed for that purpose. The feedback on that has been very good. So we hopefully we'll be able to take some technological advances and employ them in our process to be able to help streamline it further.
What about, I think one of the complaints that we hear when people go through the process is they don't want to work in our jails.
Yeah.
Cops want to be street cops when they hire on and they hear they have to work in our jails. Would you consider separating the two out where deputies work patrol and custody is a completely different, separate division?
You know, I'm open to any suggestions, and we would put people together to be able to take a look at what opportunities are out there. I know this organization went through a period of time where they looked at having different level deputies. There were some issues there where it was almost a caste system within the organization, which is not helpful in building team building or building camaraderie. And so I want to be careful that we learn from the issues of the past to be able to move forward in a way where we're able to accomplish our mission, we're able to put people in roles where they are fulfilled, where they have a career path, and where things are going to be optimal from a standpoint of being able to perform the mission, also to be able to deal with morale issues as well. And so as we move forward, I wouldn't preclude us and say that, no, we would never go that way. I look at, and having not grown up in this organization, I look at the time that our people spend in custody. What a tremendous learning experience that is that you don't get in other departments. Granted, if you came into the organization to be a street deputy, and at that time you spend in custody, you may not feel as productive, but I would argue as well that our deputies who go out into the field or move on to detectives will reflect back on the time they spent in custody for lessons learned that they didn't even realize they were learning at the time, but how to talk to inmates, how to talk to people on the street, how to be able to get information from people. And it's something that comes over time from working in an environment like that. And so I do believe it is a good learning experience for people coming out of the academy, but at the same time, if you end up working in there well beyond what you had ever planned on working in there, and you feel you can't get out to the field, which is what you came on to do, there's a tremendous amount of frustration there. So I think we've addressed some of that by allowing people to be able to get out there at a much earlier stage, and again, it's dependent on where it is they're trying to go to. But that is a work in progress, but I wouldn't close any doors on what opportunities are available to us.
I know you've always been open to the input of the unions, and I do appreciate that. There is still a level of frustration on our side on the hiring process and the slow movement of this task force. You mentioned that recruitment, they have, was it 8 more deputies?
We went from 8 to 23.
8 to 23.
Yeah.
And that's good. We have more recruiters out there, and I know the Board of Supervisors authorized a consultant to help with marketing. But that's only one component of the big train.
Right.
And we are not seeing, at least we haven't been told, about changes in the background process, changes in polygraphs, changes in the medical, which we know isn't done by the sheriff, but still needs to be addressed in our hiring process. Size of our academy, capabilities of the academy, physical capabilities as well, including driving, EVOC training, and range training. Everything has to be done in order for us to be effective in that hiring process, and we're just not seeing it. Would you be open to more dialogue between the unions and you or the executives on this?
No, absolutely. I'm wide open, all ears for any suggestions that the unions have, that anyone really has. We want to be a best practice organization, and we want to be the place that people look to replicate what we do on any front. On the recruitment, hiring, and training, I sat on the Post Commission for a number of years, and a lot of what we do in the academy environment is spoken for by mandates from the California Commission on Peace Officer Standards and Training. And so we have some latitude, but it's pretty limited as to what is part of the curriculum, what the requirements are for bringing someone onto the job. We have in the past looked at the sequencing of the testing process, and we made some changes there, and it made it more efficient. So someone coming in would take the written, and then they would take a physical agilities before they would take the more expensive components. So previously we had been running people through things that were more costly, and then they would fail out, and the things that we had done previously that were much less expensive, the written, the oral interview, and the physical agilities. Why wash somebody out later rather than earlier if we're going to have to pay? That money could be better spent then on recruiting additional people. And so a number of things like that have been done, and that has been, I think, a strategic move that has paid dividends for us and allowed us to go from that 36 months down to 8 months. But certainly wide open to anything that you have or that anyone has as far as being better.
One of the recommendations that we made on the recruitment that we think will help, it won't solve all the problems, but it'll help, is we represent the custody assistants and security officers and security assistants. Right. And they've already gone through a background to get hired, and a lot of them want to become deputy sheriffs. We've asked the department to consider expediting those who are already employees, those who have performed well in those classifications, who want to become deputy sheriffs, right, before outside folks. There's a reason for that. One, we already know their backgrounds, we already know the quality of their work, and it is kind of a reward for their good performance. But it's also easier to take those people, do the modified backgrounds with them, get them into an academy class, and then hire behind them, right, because their academy classes are much shorter, right, and we can hire more quickly. But there's been resistance in the department to do that. I know we've done some, yeah, but there has been resistance to actually creating what we're talking about. If you are a custody assistant or a security officer, security assistant, and your performance in the department is good, we believe that the department should expedite. If you apply to become deputy sheriff, you should go to the top of the pile, mm-hmm, and we should process you more quickly. Yeah. And then, because the department benefits as well. It doesn't just benefit them for being employees, right, although I think that's important, but I think it makes it easier for us to hire and solve some of our shortage problems.
Yeah, I'm with you in the spirit of that. I know that's something we talked about well over a year ago and asked that we try and capitalize on that. I want to be able to take care of the people within the organization, create a career path for them, and if they choose to come in as a security officer or CA, that they have the ability to be able then to move on and become a deputy sheriff if that's what they choose to do. And we want to be able to expedite that and take advantage of what we already have as far as information on performance, on who this person is and what they can offer to us in the future. I know we have done some of that. I would be interested in looking if you have individual cases as to why things are moving or not moving, because we can learn from those cases. My understanding, when I have followed up before and looked at specific cases, there were other issues that I wasn't aware of, and it made sense as to why things were not moving. I'm sure that's not the situation in all cases. So I'd like to work with you more on that, and if there are people who feel that they are being bogged down and that the process is not moving as it should be moving, we're happy to look into it and see if it's being held up artificially somewhere. We'll create, move the logjam. But if it's something that we can explain as to why there's a slowdown, or we need more information, or we need to look into something else, or if it's not going to happen, to be open with the person and tell them, I'm sorry that for this reason or that reason, it doesn't look good in that regard.
We don't object to those who have problems, yeah, not getting through. Right. What we're asking for is that when they apply to become a deputy sheriff, right, and they are already an employee in the sheriff's department performing well, right, that I'll give it in I used to work background, so for me, they would simply go in a different color folder. Okay. That folder goes to backgrounds. That background investigator knows that that is an expedited file. That is a current employee who's applied to become a deputy sheriff. Right. And that background investigator makes that a priority over folks, yeah, from the street. Right. That's the system that we're asking for. Yeah. We do understand that if they don't qualify, they don't qualify. Yeah, right, we're okay, right, with that. Yeah. We're asking for that, though, okay, so that they get, yeah, expedited.
We'll work with you on that.
Okay, I appreciate that. I want to go into promotions, because promotions is a sore subject with our sworn side in particular.
Okay.
Externally, We've read reports of criticisms about some of the people that have been promoted to high levels that have questionable backgrounds, at least in the eyes of the media.
Right.
Internally, we have complaints from people who try to get promoted but are told it's because of their background that they can't get promoted. And there's a great deal of frustration in that promotion process about equality, fairness,
Right.
and it also goes towards the process itself. So we have a banding system, and there are people who score lower promoted before people who have a higher score, and
Right.
sometimes the higher score never even gets promoted.
Right.
We've asked to go to a number list, which the department used to have for sergeants, because it takes away that whole issue. You test, you take the components of the test,
Right.
you get a score, the higher score person goes first.
Right.
And it's simple. If we allow this system to say, we'll just pick out of this 50 to 100 people, and the 50th guy can get promoted before the first guy, then it becomes a jockeying job. So then the 50th guy tries to position himself, maybe as a division aide, to get picked up
Sure.
first.
Yeah.
And it just creates a lot of anger and
I get it.
and
This
disappointment.
frustration, when you look at, we've all been involved in the promotional process, and when we don't get it, what we were trying to get, and we worked very hard to get, we're not happy with it. Part of that is, the kind of the way things go. If we were to have a numbered list like you recommend, that would then solve one problem, but potentially create other problems. When we have what we have currently, we have the ability to be able to use some discretion. There are people who have baggage, who have things in their past. I'm a believer in second chances and redemption, but we look very, very closely at what it is and how long ago it was and what's happened since then. So a lot of these cases that people have cited, an awful lot of thought went into these. They were not done lightly. They were not done because they were somebody's buddy. They were done because this person demonstrated, at least since I've been here, that they had leadership skills that were advantageous to the organization, that whatever it was in their past, they had overcome that, and they had demonstrated by performance and behavior over an extended period of time that they had the leadership skills necessary to be helpful to the organization. It's one of those things where discretion is important, I believe, in promotion, in the promotional process, because somebody can be a great test taker, but not a great leader. So the way we do it now allows us to be able to evaluate that. Somebody then legitimately takes the test, gets on the list, they get a look. And if their leadership skills and their scores are good, in all likelihood, they're going to be good to go. They're going to get promoted. If somebody takes the test and does well and comes out high, but have all sorts of other issues, their leadership skills are lacking, they have interpersonal conflict in their past continuously, or for whatever reason, that we would feel that it's not advantageous to the organization to put them in charge of a number of people in a very complex environment, then now currently we have the latitude to be able to screen for that. And so, there's no reason in the world why we wouldn't want the best people we can promote, but how do we define the best person for that fit? And I think the discretion gives us some latitude to do that. I understand the frustration, and as much as we can be, as open as we can be about addressing those issues, we will. But as you know, we're limited by the laws that surround personnel selection and the personnel process to be able to share much. So in the vacuum of information sharing, there is a secondary story that happens, and people get frustrated, and I'm sorry for that. But when I look at the big picture and what's the best for the organization, I believe that the way we're currently doing it, while it may be flawed, is as good as we could get based on what we know today. But always open to listen to new ways of doing it, and I want to be as fair to everybody as I can. And when I look back, going back to one of your first questions about successes, when I look at our promotional system today and I compare it to before I got here, some of the issues that I had heard over and over again from people were that you had to work certain parts of the county in order to be viable for promotion to certain other jobs. And I think we have leveled the playing field where everybody has an opportunity to be selected for any job in the Sheriff's Department if they show that they have the skills, the performance, the behavior, the leadership, and the qualities that we're looking for that job. It's not a check-the-box thing where you worked here or you worked there, so you're good to go. It's show me who you are as a person and what you can do for the organization and the public that we serve. And I think we've come a long way on that.
That system that used to exist where you had to work certain areas was largely a result of a particular powerful executive
Right.
who required you to do it or favored you if you worked in those spots. Some of our members say that executive is now gone and replaced with a dozen other executives who do the same thing, where they take care of their own people. One of your executives told me that he was promoting a person that worked directly for him who had less background, less experience than a lot of tenured employees vying for the same promotion. And the answer that was given was, I know he'll be good at that next assignment, which is kind of what you're talking about.
Yeah.
The message, though, that I got was you had to work for that guy in order to be considered, because he doesn't know hundreds of other people who are actually more qualified, who have, for lack of a better word, earned the right to compete for this promotion.
Right.
And it was simply the guy who positioned himself as his aide to get promoted that worked. And we think that sends a bad message. It also encourages, I hate to use the word sucking up, but it encourages people to just say, I just need to become that person's aide in order to get promoted.
Well, certainly somebody who becomes an aide gets one of those positions where it's high exposure. You get to know people in the organization at the higher levels. They get to know you, and that can be a two-edged sword, that if you can't perform at the levels that you're expected to, then you potentially ruin your own reputation as well. If you come in or you're brought into those positions to take a look at you as far as your behavior, your performance, your ability to be able to lead, and your administrative skills, and then you perform at a high level, that's what those spots are there for, to be able to evaluate somebody in a high-stress position as it relates to, the admin side of the house, to be able to get people who are capable of going to the next level, of being able to step into, say, a captain's position and to be able to be successful. So often our senior executives will reach out in the field and bring people into an aide spot so that they can evaluate them. And there are people who come into the aide spots and then end up not promoting. They end up going back into the field, maybe on their own decision or at the decision of someone else, because it's not what they thought it would be, or they're not performing at a level that would indicate that they would be on the promotional list in the short term at least. And so it is a testing ground, really, for is this person, are we setting them up for success by bringing them in and looking at them to potentially promote someone out of there. So when people say that more people get promoted out of aide spots, well, part of that is the nature of it. They're brought in to look at them for consideration of promotion. Are they ready, or do they have the skills necessary? And they may be a great person and a great leader, but if we were to promote them, we'd be setting them up for failure. So we will put them in another position where we can mentor them and give them the skills necessary so that the next go-around they'll be a viable candidate. My goal is not to put someone in a position and promote them if we feel that by doing that we're going to be detrimental to them or the organization. But if we can train somebody, if we can mentor them and give them the skills necessary where we know they're ready, they're going to go out there and they're going to perform well. That's the goal. I want all of our people to be successful in whatever role they have, because whatever any one of us succeeds in or fails in, it reflects on all of us.
I think you have a lot more faith in your executives than I do. Well, let me start with that. In a perfect world, what you're saying makes complete sense to me. Unfortunately, we're dealing with human beings and human beings in a position of power. And I believe that they are abusing that power and that there is currently no accountability for what they're doing. For example, we have heard that there was a high executive who instructed a lower executive on who he should have as his aide because they were trying to promote somebody that they wanted. The chief didn't want him, but they were forced to take him. Would you, I don't know if you think that's even appropriate, maybe you do, but we think that there should be some accountability for your executives who are doing things that are not in line with what you just said, that it's clear favoritism, or frankly, if you're going to become considered for a captain promotion to a patrol station, you should have some patrol background. Just bringing somebody in and saying, you're going to be my aide and then we're going to promote you and send you out to a station is not only a disservice to the department and to the others competing for that job who have more experience, it's a disservice for that individual. And we've seen that in the past where people are taken care of and get promoted and ultimately do fail or have difficulty performing at that level because they didn't have the experience. And that's what we're concerned about. We understand that there are people that are deserving and are good that become aides. We're not saying that aides are all bad. And that you look at people for the future and look for superstars to move on up. We just have a concern that there is abuse by your executives in who they're selecting and why they're selecting, and that it's not in line with what you want. Would you be okay if we brought those to you directly?
Yeah, no, let me know whatever your concerns are. We'll take a look at them. You know, and I look at that concern, I can see where that comes from. You know, if somebody believes that they've worked hard, they've done a number of different things, and somebody else that maybe a peer is getting picked over them, they may not see why that is happening, and they may say that it's because of relationship, and possibly it is. But it also may because we don't see our own failings. We don't see why somebody else might be a better candidate. It's hard to look in the mirror and say that, you know what, it's my own fault. I didn't do this, or I didn't do that, or I didn't treat this person well somewhere along the way. There's a number of factors that weigh into any of this, but if you think there's abuses in any way, I'd love to be able to hear from that.
I appreciate that.
And we have an open door, you know, anytime.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think you're right. You're always going to have individuals who think that they should have been promoted, and we know that. But what I would bring to you is some promotions that come up that are made that look like that person may have not been the best person amongst the whole group.
Right.
And if it's really obvious, we'd like to be able to bring that to you to say, we don't think that that was appropriate, and somebody is just taking care of someone they golf with, someone they drink with, whatever.
If it's a perception, it's important to me. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Let me ask about, and I'm not sure that you could even talk about it, but ALADS had filed a lawsuit regarding this internal Brady list that the Sheriff's Department has. We were told that the DA liked the Brady system that they had at the time, and that they, amongst others, obviously ALADS and us, didn't really understand why there was a need to create this internal Brady list. Why do you believe it was necessary to do that?
Yeah, thanks. Great question. When I look at where we are relative to that, my goal was to be able to get clarification. We're in a position where we are required to provide exculpatory evidence to the defense through the DA if we're aware of something in a background of one of our employees that is problematic. So we have an obligation there under Brady. We have other obligations under the Peace Officer Bill of Rights. And the two are not, they don't mesh necessarily. So what I'm looking for is clarification so that we're doing it right. And when you look at, okay, well, why would you want that? Well, the goal here is that we want to be in line with the law. We want to be able to do things the right way. And a practical example is if you have somebody with something in their background that we may know about, but the DA doesn't know about, and the DA puts one of our people forward as a witness, say in a capital case for a deputy's murder, and we end up putting them out there, and we've seen cases in the past with other departments where an employee has been embarrassed by something that was in his past that was misconduct, and the DA didn't know about it. The DA, if they had known about it, wouldn't have used that person as a witness in the prosecution. And really what we're looking for in this is the clarification, but the objective is to be able to have the DA aware of things that they need to be aware of in successfully prosecuting the crimes that we bring them.
And where's the court case at right now? The judge ruled?
Yeah, it's waiting to be heard by the state Supreme Court.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the lower court ruled that you couldn't release that information to the DA, is that right?
Yeah, it went back and forth, and now it's going to be heard finally.
Okay.
Yeah, so we'll get some closure on it fairly soon.
Okay. One of the more recent issues that came up was regarding concealed weapons permits. Specifically the retirees. When they retire, what we heard was that there was an increase in those who file for medical retirements being denied their CCWs. An obvious reason would be that they can't hold a gun, right? That's an obvious reason. Or the other one is mental instability. Those are the two very, very obvious. We have concern that some executives are interpreting an injury or a doctor's report and concluding that this person cannot carry a gun. And so they are denying the CCWs for those. You know that CCWs are a huge issue for police officers.
Sure, absolutely.
Spent
Absolutely.
30-something years.
Sure.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
We have asked that the department maybe reconsider that process to simply, they have to qualify. If you can't shoot the course of fire that's required, that we require for you to carry a gun, then you can't carry a gun. But if you can, let's say I have a shoulder injury on my right and I'm right-handed, if I can still qualify left-handed, I should still get my CCW because I'm capable of shooting the required course of fire. And I bring that up because I think it's a really simple solution. And you went to the retiree roundup.
Sure.
I was there. There's some old guys there that have CCWs and can carry that can qualify.
Absolutely.
And so, would you be open to the idea of maybe not having executives review these and make their own determinations based on what they think, and just simply say, if you can qualify, I'm talking about medical injuries, not mental issues. If you can qualify, you can carry. We're not going to stop you from carrying if you can qualify.
I've heard this, what you're talking about here recently, and there's been no policy change from where it was in the past. If you're disabled in some fashion psychologically, or you have a physical inability to be able to qualify to fire a weapon, well, those have always been considerations in whether or not somebody was granted a CCW. We haven't changed any of that. So if you're familiar with a particular situation, please let me know and we'll dig into it and find out what happened. But my fear is that this is more of a story that got legs when there's an explanation that we're not hearing that side of it. But certainly we haven't done anything to further that as far as change in policy or becoming more restrictive on that. And so I'd love to be able to work with you on that.
I can give you an example because I personally got involved in this case. A gentleman had a shoulder injury. The doctor said that he could not hold a gun for an extended period of time. Therefore, he couldn't perform an arduous job. He was forced to retire. He didn't want to, but he was forced to retire. He had a second shoulder surgery, and that one was better. And he went to the range. He was able to hold a gun better. And he shot expert, which is better than I shoot. Yeah. He shot expert. He had a hearing, and he was denied his CCW. There's an appeal process. He went through that appeal process in the Sheriff's Department, and he was again denied. The argument given was because a doctor said that he couldn't hold a gun for an extended period of time, we believe that this creates liability risk to the department, and therefore we're going to deny. That was the answer that was given to him. I was also told by a member of your executive team that I couldn't take it to the sheriff. It was a different sheriff at the time because the hearing officer's decision was final. I disagree with that as well. I think if the sheriff wants to issue it, he has the authority and ability to do so. But that's one example, and I will try and get you other examples so that you're aware of it.
I'm happy to work with you. If you're aware of things that I wouldn't be aware of in that regard, we have systems in place. They work most of the time. There's always things that break down, and it's important that we work together to be able to rectify when that happens.
I appreciate that. Let me shift over back into the custody side. One of the sore subjects, and I know you're aware of it because I know you've been around to the facilities and have talked to our sergeants and lieutenants. There was a mandate that they work 5 years in custody before they'd be allowed to leave. And I know there's been discussion about changing that. But nothing formal has come out. I think you guys are working on the process to do this. But can you tell our members that you are in favor, or it hasn't been decided yet, that they be allowed to go out after 3 years?
Yeah, it'd be, I think, unfair to make a determination yet, but I'll tell you that we are looking at dual track in total. Part of that is looking at the 5-year requirement. When that was recommended by the CCJV, what we had, as everybody watching this knows better than I, we had a revolving door in custody that people would often go there and get out of there as quick as they could. We didn't have stability, particularly in the supervisory ranks, for long periods of time. There were people who were perceived as being stuck there, and others who could leave did. It was a difficult environment for a long period of time. When I look back in the past 4 years, that is a different place today. Custody, we have some of the best and the brightest in the organization in our custody specialty. I'm very, very proud of the work they do. I try and walk through our facilities as frequently as I can, and I'm continuously impressed at the level of compassion, particularly, that I see, as well as the competence that we would all expect in what our people do. But it's an amazing environment in dealing with the challenges of humanity that we deal with just on a mass basis in the custody environment every day. I mentioned earlier that 31% of our total inmate population are dealing with serious mental health issues that would be better probably suited to be housed in a psychiatric facility rather than a jail. But the reality is we are by default that facility, and we have become the largest mental health facility in the nation, and in a place that shouldn't be a mental health facility at all. So our folks have adapted to being able to provide the level of security and service and care for our inmate population that I think anybody from anywhere else were to look at that, they'd be very proud of what we're doing. So it's an environment where you can't come in, stay a little while and leave and expect to have the expertise you need. There needs to be some period of time where you're deployed there. You know you're going to be there for a period of time, and you have the stability that comes along with that, as well as the ownership, particularly from a supervisor that knows that this is my team, this is my responsibility. We're going to train, we're going to mentor, we're going to put people in the right place, we're going to ensure that people have a career track and that we're helping them advance in their career. That doesn't come, generally speaking, from people who know that they're going in there and trying to get out as quick as they can. So to try to balance what's the right amount of time, so that we're not locking somebody in for an unreasonable amount of time, but yet as an organization we're still getting the stability that we need.
Would you consider separating it out completely so there aren't people going over there who want to go over here type thing? In other words, if you choose a career in custody, that is your career, and that's the career path you chose. If you want patrol and the rest of the department, detectives and others, you can choose that career path as well, so that you don't have that issue.
Yeah, it's something I'd be willing to look at anything, as I mentioned, but also then the problems that come with that there are people who get a tremendous amount of value out of the time they spend in custody, knowing, though, that they can down the road go out and get in the field and patrol, get into detectives, they go into any one of the specialties we have. That's kind of the beauty of this organization, is that you have the latitude to be able to have what would appear to others to be several careers in one, because of the diversity of responsibilities that we have as an organization. So I would look at that, but I would look at it very carefully, because I wouldn't want to preclude people from being able to move around the organization and getting everything they can out of a career.
Okay, great. Thank you. Let me just finish, because this is an election season. I'm going to just ask you a very basic question. Why do you believe that the employees of the Sheriff's Department should support your bid for sheriff for re-election?
Well, certainly I'm doing it because I believe I'm the most qualified. When I look at what I bring to the table, and not to disparage anyone else, but I believe I have 37 years of experience in a variety of different assignments in policing. I am networked in with police leaders from throughout the nation and throughout the world. I'm active with the Major County Sheriff's Association, as well as with the Major City Chiefs Association. I'm on the board for IACP, International Association of Chiefs of Police, as well as the Los Angeles County Police Chiefs Association and Cal State Sheriff's Association. So much of what we do is through networking, through being able to get things done because of relationships that you have. I spent 29 years with the LAPD, our biggest partner in the county. 5 years as chief of Long Beach PD, the second largest police agency in the county, and now sheriff of Los Angeles County. I think I bring together a mix of experience and relationships that are unique, the first time in history that anybody's ever done this. And I love this job. I love this department. I take this job very seriously, and I believe that I have done everything I can in my career and in my life to be the right person for this organization at this time. As I mentioned earlier, we're going through a very difficult period in American policing. People are looking from across the nation and around the world to the LA County Sheriff's Department for the way to do many things. And I think we are providing that example to agencies in a way that we should all be very proud of. And so when I look at all that's involved in managing this organization, for someone else to come along who's managed, 20 people, 18 people, and now to try and transition into managing 18,000 people, with public safety responsibilities that are unmatched anywhere else, over 4,700 square miles, as well as our regional, our state, and our national responsibilities. That is a unique job and requires a unique fit for an individual. And I'm blessed, I feel, to be able to be that person at this time.
Great. I want to thank you for joining us for this interview. I know we're going to be talking in another interview with a little more detail about public safety in general. So I want to thank you for joining us.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Brian.